Hey everyone, my name is Marshall Mind, and today I'm going to be showing you guys how to deny very basic transitions from the ground when you're the fighter on top. Now, if you still have the beta and you've been practicing, then this tutorial might not exactly be for you because, well, you've already practiced the stuff and you already know this stuff. But if you're a new player thinking about getting EA Sports UFC 2 and you want to control your opponent on the ground and you want to learn how to do that on a very basic level, then this will be very helpful to you. I'm going to be going over 7 positions: the guard, half guard, side control, mount, backside, and back sitting. And without wasting too much time, here we go. When you find yourself in your opponent's guard and you're the fighter on top, all you need to pay attention to is whatever direction your opponent is moving. For some fighters, they can move to the left and get up, they can move to the right and transition, they can hold their stick down and get up, or they can hold their right stick up and get up. Whatever transition they are performing doesn't really matter when you want to maintain control. All you need to do is identify which direction they are moving. So if your opponent tries to transition to the right, their body will face towards your right, and to block that, you hold R2 and flick the right stick to your right. If they attempt to transition to the left, their body will face towards the left, and to block that, you hold R2 and flick the left stick to your left. Now this one is it's pretty simple, especially for players that spend some time with EA Sports UFC 1, but there's a brand new transition that has been added to the game, and for this one you have to remember the animation. The second you see your opponent's arm across your neck, the second you see that arm fly across your neck, you know that's your cue to hold R2 and flick the right stick up, and that will deny the transition. Usually that transition leads to the fighter on the bottom getting up, or it leads to a reversal, or should I say a transition. Now the most recognizable get up from EA Sports UFC 1 with your opponent's feet on your hips is also denied the same exact way that it was denied in EA Sports UFC 1. You hold R2 and you flick the right stick down to defend against that transition. Now the guard it's way more complicated than what I've just demonstrated right now, but if you memorize these tells and you learn how to deny them consistently, everything else in the guard should come easy for you. So just focus on this for now. Now when it comes to half guard, this is one of the least complicated positions in my opinion, because most characters you'll probably come across can only get back to guard from half guard or take your back from half guard. And if you can deny these two transitions consistently, you'll be able to hold half guard long enough to improve your position. Because let's be honest, you're not gonna come across a lot of players that just want to sit in half guard. I highly doubt that. So to block the transition from half guard bottom back to guard, you have to pay attention to your opponent's arms and what direction it is going. From this angle, if he wants to get back to guard, he'll place his left arm on your knee, and that's your cue to hold R2 and flick the right stick to your left to block that. If he wants to take your back, you'll notice his right arm grabbing your left arm, and that is your cue to hold R2 and flick the right stick to your right, and you block the transition. Pretty simple, straightforward, and easy position to understand. Now let's talk about side control, and in my opinion, this position was the easiest position to hold during the beta, and it's pretty simple because you don't have a lot of transitions to worry about when you're the fighter on top. Your opponent can either go back to half guard or he can transition to sprawl, and all you need to pay attention to is what direction his body is facing during the transitions. From this angle, if your opponent wants to get back to half guard, you'll notice his body positioned to the left, and to block that, you hold R2 and flick your right stick to the left, and you'll deny that. And if he wants to get to sprawl, he'll position his body to your right, and to block that, you know what to do. You hold R2 and flick your right stick to your right, and you'll block that. Once again, pretty simple and straightforward position as well. Now, when it comes to mount, a lot hasn't really changed when it comes to blocking transitions. You just have to pay attention to your opponent's hands and pay attention to what direction they are attempting to go. When you're the fighter on top and your opponent attempts to get back to half guard through the left side, he'll put his left hand on your knee and push. This is your tell, okay? And this is also your cue to hold R2 and flick the right stick to your left to block that transition. If he wants to get back to half guard through the right side, he'll put his right arm on your knee and push. And this is your tell as well as your cue to hold R2 and flick the right stick to your right to block it. Now, the get up from mount is blocked differently this time around. In EA Sports UFC 1, you had to hold R2 and flick the right stick down to block it. Not anymore. In EA Sports UFC 2, what you do is you hold R2 and you flick the right stick up to block the get up. This makes things much simpler, it makes things much more logical, and it's also easier to understand when you're a beginner. Now, when it comes to blocking left or right, this is also the same exact way that you block your opponent's attempt to roll to his back. You block in whatever direction he is rolling towards. Now, if your opponent does manage to roll to his back, what you have to worry about is the transition from back mount bottom to half guard. And this one is also different from EA Sports UFC 1. To block your opponent's attempt to get back to half guard through the left, you hold R2 and flick your right stick to your left and you'll block it. And if you want to transition to half guard through your right, you hold R2 and flick the right stick to your right and you'll block it. Now, I've been testing this out, and so far I don't really believe there's a way to block the transition from back mount bottom to full mount bottom. So don't even worry about that. All you need to focus is on blocking the transition from back mount bottom to half guard bottom. That's the important thing to remember. Next position we're going to talk about is the backside position. And from this position, you have three things to worry about. The transition from backside bottom to side control, okay? The transition from backside bottom to full guard, and the transition from backside bottom to standing back clinch. Each of these transitions are denied by focusing on what direction your opponent is attempting to go to. From this angle we're looking at right now, if your opponent attempts to transition to side control, you'll notice his body shifting towards your left, and that is your cue to hold R2 and flick the right stick to your left. And if he's attempting to get back to full guard, you'll notice his body shifting to the right, and this is also your cue to hold R2 and flick the right stick to your right. The last transition to try and memorize is the transition from backside to standing back clinch. And for this one, you need to pay attention to your opponent's knee, okay? When he is attempting to transition to standing back clinch, he'll get off one knee, plant his feet, and that is your cue, that is your tell. That is your cue to hold R2 and flick the right stick up to block it. The tells are not too complicated in my opinion, but I do also believe that it's going to require a bit of practice to learn how to block that consistently, mostly to remember those tells. Now, the final position I'm going to talk about is complicated, but I honestly believe that in just a short while, everyone is going to figure it out, and it might in fact become way too easy to hold. And the position I'm talking about is back sitting. This is when you have your opponent's back in a seated posture. From this position, you have two things to worry about. Your opponent can transition from back sitting to full guard through the left, and he can also transition from back sitting to full guard through the right. Each transition is denied differently, and you can recognize them by memorizing the tells. Now, if your opponent is attempting to transition towards the side with your arm over his shoulder, okay, the arm over the shoulder, he will pull on your arm and straighten it out. He's going to pull on that arm and he's going to straighten that arm out. When you see that, when you see him straighten out that arm, this is your tell. This right here is your cue to hold R2 and flick the right stick in the direction of your arm above his shoulder. And in this case, in this angle we're looking at right now, it will be to the left. So you hold R2 and flick the right stick to your left and you'll block it. If he attempts to transition towards the arm under your shoulder, okay, under his shoulder, I meant to say, the fighter will grab the arm under his shoulder and peel it away. You'll see him peel it away and then go back to the other arm. When you see this, this is your tell. This is your cue to hold R2 and flick the right stick in whatever direction the arm under his shoulder is facing. And in this case, it's going to be towards the right. So you hold R2 and flick your right stick to your right and you'll deny it. First instance, he's going to straighten out the arm that's over his shoulder and you deny in that direction. Second instance, he's going to peel away the other arm that's under his shoulder. And to deny that, you have to deny in that direction. It's complicated when you're first getting into it. It can be, and it's going to take a while for some people to remember the tells. But once you do remember the tells, I believe this will become one of the easier positions to hold in the game. Once again, like in my previous videos, it's going to require practice, and if you do practice it, you'll get good enough to at least have a chance of surviving and have a chance of holding your opponent down on the ground for a short while. The ground game this time around is very, very deep, and there's a lot to learn, and as I get better with it, I'll share my knowledge with you guys, so definitely keep an eye out for that. I really appreciate you guys sticking around even though my upload schedule is absolutely terrible. And I do promise you guys it will not be like this when the game finally drops. So you can count on that. When this game drops, you will have videos from me every single day or every other day at the most. So just hang in there with me. Share the video if you found it to be informative, and leave any questions at all that you might have in the comment section, and I'll be sure to answer them. And in the words of the great Conor McGregor, thank you so much for your support. You're my family. You've been there from day one. I'm blown away. I'm shaking with it. Thank you so much, and be safe, guys.